The United States Senate does not allow voting online. My country has called me. I have answered.
We interrupt this program for breaking news from ABC 11 Eyewitness News.
Reported a 5.8 earthquake reported outside of Richmond, Virginia. The shaking was felt actually right here in the Triangle. We felt it here in the newsroom. I was in our parking garage and the pillars were shaking in there. It was also felt in Washington, D.C. and as far away as New York City. We have a lot of people that are speaking with us who are calling in telling us that they felt it as far as Roseville. There's a woman who said she thinks she felt a earthquake. Her whole house shook. This was in Raleigh. She called her husband in downtown Raleigh where he also felt it. Here's a look at the Raleigh skyline. There are no reports of any damage here locally, but a woman from Henderson called us and said that things did fall off of her wall. She also says the walls were making some noise. We're still sorting through all of the details for you. We know that this hit in Virginia, 5.8 earthquake in Virginia. We also have some reports coming in from RDU. There were no reports of any disruptions, but a lot of people felt this quake. Again, a 5.8 earthquake outside of Richmond. Also felt here in Raleigh in the surrounding areas. We have some calls coming in to our Raleigh newsroom. Now, this is the first earthquake I can remember feeling here in North Carolina. I've been here for 7 years, and this is the first one that I've ever felt, and we're continuing to gather details for us. Now, we have some new information that's just coming in. This is now a 5.9 earthquake, measured 5.9 on the Richter scale. These are some live pictures from WABC, our sister station in New York and New York City. You can see people gathering around outside on the streets. There were a lot of buildings that were evacuated there in New York City. We received some information a little bit earlier saying that the government buildings in the city, including City Hall, were evacuated. A 26-story federal courthouse in Lower Manhattan began swaying, and hundreds of people were seen leaving the building. Officers weren't letting people back in when that happened because, you know, this is kind of just a situation where it's unknown. You know, you don't know if there's going to be another one right away, and just kind of a shocking experience for some people. I've been here in North Carolina for 7 years, and I've never seen this, you know, happen before. Also, growing up in the South, don't have a whole lot of experience with earthquakes, not like people who live on the West Coast and deal with them a little bit more frequently. As far as the RBC Tower is concerned here in downtown Raleigh, Kathy Waters is still with us. Are they allowing you to go back in the building, or?
At this point, I'm not sure. Okay. I'm not even sure I want to go back in the building because, like you said, you don't know what's going to happen from this point forward, if there will be more repercussions.
And it just to be on the safe side, you see the folks there that were there in New York, they're outside, and a lot of people are gathering outside the Raleigh Eyewitness News Center, basically talking about this, trying to figure out exactly what's going on. Well, if you're just joining us right now, let me give you a recap. We have information that a 5.9 earthquake was reported outside of Richmond, Virginia. We felt shaking here in North Carolina, in downtown Raleigh, also in the New York area. People also felt it in Washington, D.C., as far away as New York City. And here is a live look right now from WABC. This is in New York City. You can see people still in the streets from the buildings that were evacuated there. We had folks calling us shortly after this happened. I had a friend text me, and she works in North Raleigh, and said that she felt tremors. We also had someone in Roseville that called and said that they felt it there. Here's a picture of the Washington, D.C. area. We are hearing reports that this earthquake was felt as far away as D.C. too. So what we're gathering now is more information on whatever we can tell you about the safety aspects of this, what more can be expected as far as, you know, buildings being evacuated and what people are going to do. But call us and let us know, you know, what you felt and what's going on in your area, because we definitely did feel it here in downtown Raleigh. Reports are 5.9 on the Richter scale. That's another shot from our sister station, WABC, this earthquake that we just experienced probably about 30 minutes ago. And here with me now, I have my colleague Shay Christen. And Shay, you were out talking with some people on the street here on Fayetteville Street in downtown Raleigh, outside the Raleigh Eyewitness News Center. What are they telling you?
Well, yeah, Tisha, I was just sitting at the desk here working on my story about Hurricane Irene, of course, and then we're feeling the shakes, thinking it was just a large truck maybe coming by here in downtown Raleigh. And then all of us looking at each other. What was that? Did you feel that? And so we went outside, grabbed my photographer, Larry Chavis, and we saw everyone else outside with their cell phones in hand. Did you feel that? Did you feel that? We ran into workers from the Progress Energy Center. They were up on the 20th floor. They felt the shaking. They started looking around at each other. Is that you shaking my cubicle? You know, I'll be done in just a minute. And they're all like, no, I think that was an earthquake. And so most of us surprised. I've been here 10.5 years. I've never felt the earthquake like that here before. My husband is working in Rollsville. He called me. Did you feel that? Did you feel it? We felt it all the way up here in Rollsville. And so a lot of people felt this earthquake. They're calling in with their different eyewitness news accounts. So at the Progress Energy building, women working on the 20th floor decided we need to get out of here just in case there are aftershocks, just in case there is a larger earthquake that would come trembling here through our state. We also talked to workers at the RBC Tower who decided that's not right. I'm not used to that. I'm not used to that kind of shaking. What is that? Is that an earthquake? Everyone deciding it was, and they needed to get out of these high-rise buildings. You know, thankfully, we don't see these that often, and we are so in tune with what happens, of course, around the world, and we do see what happens in other countries. So I think people are just taking the precautions, even though it seemed to be what most would call a minimal earthquake around here in terms of the size and the aftershocks. I think everyone just wanted to get to where they felt safe, where they felt comfortable, make sure their family is safe. Ed Crump, who's been covering the trial over at the Wake County Courthouse, had said, you know, the word was going around the Wake County Courthouse. At this time, I believe he has said that the trial will continue as planned, but, you know, a lot of people just, you know, wanted to know what was going on and were trying to figure out, you know, where do they need to go from here? Is anything else happening? Are we safe to go back inside? There haven't been any evacuations ordered, to our knowledge, in the area, but I think a lot of people were just wanting to make sure they were okay before they go back into any high-rise.
Look at those people in New York City on top of the buildings. I guess they wanted to, you know, get up there and see what was going on from the top of the building, trying to figure out, you know, what do we do next? We have some information that just came in. It says the U.S. Geological Survey said the earthquake was 3.7 miles deep. Shaking was felt at the White House and all over the East Coast, as far south as Chapel Hill, North Carolina. Parts of the Pentagon, the White House, and Capitol were being evacuated. But we also got some information just from our viewers that are calling in to us and writing us. They say things like, we felt it here in Fayetteville too. We live in Oxford, North Carolina. We felt the earthquake here in Granville County, North Carolina. We have a call from our daughter in Durham who also felt it. And then we had someone else who wrote in basically saying, my sofa was rocking back and forth with me in it. My husband and son felt it upstairs too. So far what we can gather is, I would say, as far south as Fayetteville, and then we've also got some information that as far north as Rhode Island, people felt this.
And it is amazing to see some of those images from New York, people on top of the buildings coming out to the rooftop, while down here, most of everyone here in Raleigh wanted to come down to the street and get out of the building. But here you see the live picture from our sister station, WABC, flying over Manhattan, flying over the city there just to see the aftermath of the earthquake that they could clearly feel there in New York City and north of the area too. As you're reading there on the bottom of your screen, 5.9 earthquake outside Richmond, Virginia, and the shaking felt, of course, right here in the Triangle, down to the Sandhills, in our nation's capital, at the White House, at the Pentagon, all the way up to New York, and reports all the way up to Rhode Island.
Fred Shropshire is on Fayetteville Street outside the Raleigh Eyewitness News Center, and he's been talking to some folks out there. Fred, what are they telling you?
Well, it's very interesting. You know, we were talking to some folks who were having lunch at Spy's restaurant just next door to the Raleigh Eyewitness News Center. A man from Virginia, another woman from Atlanta, another one from Washington, D.C. And they felt what they said seem like a train go by. If you're used to living in a big city, you know, you'll feel it when a subway train goes under the building or near where you're standing, and that's exactly what they describe. The building was not evacuated. In fact, they kept eating lunch. They didn't think anything of it because they're visiting from out of town to attend some kind of business trip with IBM, so they're not aware that we don't have trains around here or subways, so they weren't frightened. But you know, I got to tell you, I was kind of oblivious to what was going on. You know, I was coming in off of I-40 and traffic was just moving normally. I think a lot of people who were on the interstate didn't have any idea of what was going on. If you didn't have your radio on, you couldn't feel anything. It wasn't until we got to the parking lot on Wilmington Street behind the Raleigh Eyewitness News Center that you saw a lot of people who had evacuated buildings and parking decks and looking to me, asking me what was going on. So there's a lot of confusion, a lot of concern. One of the men that we talked to sent a text message out to a friend who lives in Richmond, and that text message did not immediately go through, but then he looked at his phone as we were having the conversation, and that text message went through. So it appears that on some levels, communications with the cell phone may be getting better, that situation getting better, but still a lot of confusion and some fear out here as people are trying to figure out exactly what this is. We're not used to an earthquake here along the East Coast, especially here in North Carolina. Tisha.
All right, Fred, thank you. And we got some information to basically give to you. February 21st, 1916, the largest earthquake to ever hit North Carolina, and that was a 5.2 magnitude quake. So this one hit in Richmond, Virginia, near Richmond, Virginia, and measured at 5.9. And we felt it, of course, here in North Carolina, all the way south as, you know, Fayetteville, up north to Rhode Island.
Yeah, Fred was saying that it felt like to some people, it feels like a big truck going by the building, or a subway in the tunnel shaking, you know, the floor of the building that you're in. But yeah, around here we're not used to feeling that, and that makes sense since we haven't had a direct earthquake here for so many years. Right now,
we have Julia Milstead with Sharon Harris. Julia, can you hear us?
Yes, Tisha, I'm here.
Are there any concerns as far as Sharon Harris is concerned with this tremor that we just experienced?
Well, I can tell you, Tisha, that our operators were in the control room, obviously, and no alarms went out. As our procedures dictate, we have our crews out in the field and in the plant inspecting equipment as a precaution, but the plant is operating safely, and there does not appear to be any impact.
Okay.
And Julia, we know obviously all eyes have been on Hurricane Irene. What has your staff been doing to keep an eye on that while also getting this tremor out of the blue?
Well, we have been preparing and going through our procedures starting yesterday morning. So we are looking at things. We're watching, obviously, Hurricane Irene like the rest of North Carolina is. We'll be gearing up and starting hurricane preps within the next day here. But our plant is designed to withstand high winds. We're talking about 179 mile-an-hour winds. We're designed to withstand a 6.1 earthquake that would happen right here on the site, which obviously didn't happen. So this is a very robust site. We're talking about concrete walls that are 4 to 6 feet thick with reinforced rebar, steel rebar and steel liners. So we feel very confident that our plant is ready for anything.
All right, Julia Milstead, thank you so much for joining us from Progress Energy.
Now we have with us Mitch Withers. He's with the Earthquake Center, an expert out of Tennessee, to talk about this. Mitch, how unusual is it to have a 5.9 earthquake on the East Coast in Virginia to be felt as far south as Fayetteville up to Rhode Island? Mitch, can you hear me?
This is Mitch. This is a very large earthquake. It's very unusual. We got a magnitude of 5.9, and so that I'm still actually poring over my own records, but that may be one of the largest earthquakes on the East Coast within the past 100 years.
Wow. Is there Are there any concerns for us right now? What should we be thinking as far as maybe aftershocks, or could this happen again? Because people are standing outside and they're not quite sure whether they want to go back into buildings or not. We're hearing in New York that people are not being allowed to go back into the buildings, although some people are standing on the roof. What should be our concern right now?
If this was in Central Virginia, so here in North Carolina, that's correct?
Yes.
In North Carolina, you should be far enough away so that any aftershocks will, of course, be of smaller magnitude than the original main shock. So any aftershocks will cause less shaking than what you've already felt.
Okay, that's good to know, since most of us have not experienced an earthquake like that or the aftershocks this far.
What should people who live near the epicenter be concerned about as far as aftershocks go? Could they feel some pretty significant tremors from this point?
Yes, for the next 24 hours will be the most likely time for the largest aftershocks. They could have aftershocks in the mid-magnitude 4 range, and that's certainly large enough to cause a significant amount of shaking.
All righty, Mitch Withers, thanks so much for joining us and giving us your insight, and we will see where we go from this point and what happens here in North Carolina. Thank you for your expert advice. Now we have Julia Jarima on the phone with us. She's with State Emergency Services. Julia, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Have we had to respond to any situations due to this earthquake here in North Carolina?
The state has not been asked for any resources related to the earthquake. We're obviously getting busy, ready for a hurricane. So we've not been asked for any resources to respond to the to the earthquake. We're just reminding folks at this point. I mean, we had folks obviously here in the Triangle that felt shaking, as well as far west as Cherokee has reported some of the shaking as well. So just a good tip to, remind people that if they feel some shaking, you can always, duck or drop to the floor, cover and take hold under like a desk or a table or some piece of furniture. And if you're seeking, cover underneath the piece of furniture, hold on to that. Obviously, nothing that severe in this. Nothing that's severe in this area.
Yeah, we've received some information that the largest earthquake that we've had in North Carolina was in 1916. Can you think of anything in your recent memory that you may have experienced here?
Nothing of this great magnitude. I mean, we have had some tremors in the last couple of years reported in the mountains, but more along the 2 to 3 range, nothing on the 5 range.
All righty. Thank you so much. Julia Jarima with us with the State Emergency Services. Thank you so much for joining us.
Our Fred Shropshire continues to talk to really eyewitnesses who experienced this earthquake right here in downtown Raleigh, right outside our Raleigh Eyewitness News Center. Fred, what do you have for us?
Yeah, that's right. We're talking to one lady. Her name is Mary Jordan. Mrs. Jordan is here with us now. You work inside the courthouse. Normally you would be having lunch inside the courthouse, but today you were outside the Oxford. And tell me what happened.
Well, I was basically sitting at the table and I felt my table kind of move, and not really thinking anything like an earthquake. I kind of moved my table from the next to the wall, thinking that something was going inside the building. I didn't want my drink to tip over. And a few minutes later, a lady walked by and asked me, "Did you feel the earthquake?" I was like, "Is that what that was?" And I was kind of thinking, okay, this is North Carolina. Earthquakes do not happen in North Carolina, not now. And so I started making phone calls trying to get in touch with my daughter because I heard it was happening in D.C. So I tried to contact her, and I was having some difficulty with the phone line. And she finally called me and she said they had to evacuate, but she's fine and they're back in their building now.
Let me ask you this about your daughter. She is in Washington, D.C. What kind of a building was she in? Did she hear any alarms or any warning systems or anything like that when this happened?
There were no alarms. She said they were basically told to leave the building, and she could feel things moving around on the table or see things moving around on the table. And the staff that she works with. It's a very small staff, and they all evacuate the building. And I'm not quite sure what kind of building it is, whether it's several stories or just one story. But basically in D.C. it was probably several stories, but I'm not sure.
And normally you would have been on the 4th floor of the Wake County Courthouse. Have you talked to any of your coworkers since then, any who may have been inside at the time?
I finally did get one. I tried calling several on the phone, and for some reason I wasn't able to reach them on their cell phones either. I kept getting disconnected. I finally got to talk to one of the secretaries, and she said that she knew nothing about it, and I told her what was going on, and so she said she would let everybody else know, and that was pretty much it.
So are you going to go back to work? Is everything normal as now?
I'm going back to work, yes. I have some things that I need to take care of, so. And our courthouse is probably not the most stable place, but right now, that's where I'll be.
Okay, well, we thank you for taking the time, Miss Mary Jordan. Normally would be on the 4th floor working with the juvenile court. Thank you for telling us about your experience. Yeah, but Mrs. Jordan, she was actually trying to get in touch with her daughter for a long time, again, having some troubles with the phone lines. And finally, her daughter called her to tell her that she was doing fine. She works for the United Nations Foundation in Washington, D.C., and as far as she said, they were going back to their meeting, so they are still operating as normal, at least at that business at the United Nations Foundation in Washington, D.C., also here at the Wake County Courthouse. Tisha, Shay.
All right, Fred, thank you so much for sharing these stories with us. And we do have a couple of emails we want to share with you. We have an email from Johnny Autry. He says he lives on Highway 701 in Johnston County. He says, we felt it here. The walls and the floor shook. I thought it was a big truck, but I did not see any go by. And we have another one from Liberty, North Carolina. I felt the quake here. I could hear what sounded like military helicopters, but we couldn't see anything. It was enough to scare my dog right back into the house. It lasted for close to a minute, and thanking us for our coverage. And we want to hear from you, your experience, where you were, what you felt, what you saw and did. You can send us an email, picture, any videos. If you were able to capture this by video, that would be great to see. Send those to youreport@abc11mail.com. youreport@abc11mail.com. There is a link on the left side of our homepage.
We also have some folks reporting, sending us Facebook messages. Leslie in Suzanne Edwards says, oh my, sitting in my living room and my recliner started rocking. Didn't say anything immediately. Didn't want people to think I was crazy. LOL. Thank God you guys gave this news report. Now I know that I'm not. Candace Gabrelli said it felt like a helicopter right over our house here in Durham. We also have another one, Leslie Edwards. She said she felt it in Red Springs, North Carolina. You know, we had that caller who was calling in from Richmond who talked about living near a military installation and saying that he felt like it was a helicopter overhead or one of the military planes. And I'm sure that's what a lot of people felt in Fayetteville too, you know, not really knowing what it was, because people did feel it in Fayetteville, having Fort Bragg right there and those planes flying over. They probably didn't know what to think.
I know they're so used to the military training that, I mean, I think all of us looked around like, oh, did you feel that? Are we crazy? But there are reports of major cell phone outages too. We've heard stories, Fred talking to eyewitnesses out front, people right here in the heart of Carolina trying to get in touch with their loved ones around the D.C. area and beyond. Of course, Washington, D.C. being the major metropolitan area closest to the area near Richmond where this earthquake hit. 5.9 magnitude earthquake right outside Richmond, Virginia. The shaking felt all the way in our nation's capital, at the White House, at the Pentagon, and beyond. You can see the map there. That's right about 30 miles north of Richmond. I make that drive. I have family living in Northern Virginia, and it's amazing just how populated the area is, and I'm sure all of it, because they're not used to, you know, we're not used to earthquakes right here in North Carolina and Virginia. So I think all of us wondering what that was, realizing that was an earthquake, but thankfully there have not been reports of widespread damage. The main thing we're talking is cell phone outage issues, which most of us can't survive without our cell phone, so that's a major issue.
On the phone with us now, we have Dr. Lara Wagner. She's a UNC seismologist. Dr. Wagner, did you feel this quake?
I did.
And what were you thinking at that time?
Well, honestly, I didn't realize it was an earthquake. Like you said, it's pretty unusual around here, so I thought it was just from local construction. But, yeah, it was pretty strong shaking.
Well, this is right up your alley. What can you tell us about this, the aftershocks? And really, should we have more concerns right now, or what should we be thinking and doing?
It's unlikely that the aftershocks will be bigger than the main shock that we just felt. So I think, you know, any damage that's going to happen has been done. 5.8 is big for the East Coast, but, you know, if you lived in California, you'd be less excited about it. So in North Carolina, I don't think that there's too much to worry about anymore.
You probably have a little history as far as earthquakes in North Carolina go. Have we seen anything like this in recent history that you know of?
In the Richmond area, yes, there have been a few smallish events. The last one this size was over a century ago. So it is unusual to have something this big on the East Coast. But in 2003, I think there was a magnitude 4.3 in that area. So they do have small tremors. They're typically so small that you wouldn't feel them locally, much less this far away.
And what is it about the plates, whether that's you know, in the earth under Virginia or here in North Carolina, that would cause this earthquake or make it? And it's a rare occasion, obviously, that this happens, but clearly it does happen.
Right. So what's unusual about East Coast earthquakes is that we're not at a plate boundary. So most of the earth is broken up into plates like a cracked eggshell, and those plates are all moving past each other. So that's why California, the West Coast in general, has so many earthquakes, because it's on a plate boundary. We're not. We haven't been for quite some time, and the nearest plate boundary is out in the middle of the Atlantic. So our normal explanations for earthquakes don't really apply so well to the East Coast. So what exactly is causing these earthquakes here is really just an ongoing field of research.
All right, Dr. Laura Wagner, a UNC seismologist, thank you for joining us, and some reassurance there that she says the aftershock should not be any greater than what we have felt already. And thankfully, it was just a quick little tremble here in downtown Raleigh.
Well, Chris Homan is with us now, and Chris, it's been all about Irene up until about 1 o'clock this afternoon.
Earthquake stealing Irene's thunder, at least for one day. You know, I was driving into work, and I didn't feel it. And apparently, people in your cars, you didn't feel it at all. And all of a sudden, I got a text from my wife, and she works near the Beltline. Said everybody was wondering what was that, an earthquake? And I said, no, I have no idea what you're talking about.
You're the chief,
drinking tea, drinking some kind of something weird at work, you know. But yeah, very rare for us to feel it. Typically, we think of Western North Carolina. They're in a fairly active, or what's considered a moderate risk for an earthquake, and also the coast of North Carolina, especially into South Carolina. That's an area that also is in a higher risk for earthquakes. There you see that center just northwest of Richmond, near the mineral area, 5.9. That's where the earthquake was centered. On the East Coast, the way the soil is situated, the way our soil is compared to the West Coast, it's much sandier. We have the clay soil. On the West Coast, it's more rocky. So many earthquakes on the East Coast are felt over a much larger area. As our seismologist just said on the phone, you know, in North California, they probably wouldn't even be thinking much of this, and they wouldn't have felt it over such a wide area typically. But earthquakes on the East Coast, because of the soil, can travel much further distances. So people from Boston to North Carolina felt this one. Earthquake in Missouri once. A lot of folks are familiar with that. The New Madrid fault there is situated in southeast Missouri. One of the biggest earthquakes in U.S. history occurred there back in the 1800s. I think it was like 1810, 1812. A series of earthquakes, 8.5 or higher on the Richter scale, just rocked the East Coast. It was centered in Missouri, but felt all the way to Boston. Church bells rang in Boston from an earthquake in Missouri because of the way that these energy waves underground can travel over such great distances. And fortunately, back then, there weren't many people living in Missouri, so there wasn't a ton of damage, but it caused the Mississippi River to go backwards for a while. Yeah, so it was lakes in West Tennessee were created because of this earthquake that are still there right now. So the East Coast isn't immune to them at all, but they're just not as common, especially here in North Carolina. I've even made the comment a few times that we really don't need to worry about earthquakes, at least damaging earthquakes, earthquake. It's one of the few things we don't have to worry about. You know, we have tornadoes, we have hurricanes, we have ice storms, sometimes major snowstorms, but earthquakes aren't a huge disaster that we typically worry about.
And that's what caught all of us off guard, really, because we have been looking at Irene, all focus, all eyes have been on Irene, and it's so rare that we have an earthquake in this area and the aftershock. But thank you for the science lesson, too, and why we can feel it so far.
Yeah, and you know, what's a thing about earthquakes, too, as everybody knows, is there's no predicting them. You know, at least a hurricane you see coming for days. We're going to watch Irene. We're going to have more on that. The track is shifting eastward, by the way, which is good news for central North Carolina. But earthquakes occur in, you know, any kind of weather. The weather has nothing to do with it. So that's why living in California, other earthquake-prone areas can make life a little jittery because you never know. It could be any day. At least with even tornadoes, we have some warning. You know, you have at least a few minutes warning typically, and snow and ice storms, other disasters that can get out of hand. You have some warning, but not earthquakes. They catch you off guard.
Oh, absolutely. All right, Chief Meteorologist Chris Holman, thank you. But yeah, now good advice from Wake County Emergency Management, obviously, since most of us have never experienced this before. And since most of us also, now that we know what an earthquake feels like, then we can, you know, take those precautions the next time we start feeling that shaking, because most of us just thought it was a big truck going by, at least right here in downtown Raleigh.
As you can see, that video of Washington, D.C., look at that camera shaking. That's what the camera looked like. That's what it looked like the moment that earthquake hit. And see how quick it was. Pretty subtle. If you were standing on the ground or in a building, you probably felt a variety of different things, but that's the first pictures that we're able to look at of the cameras actually shaking. This is the Capitol cam in Washington, D.C., and this was rolling at the time that tremor hit, and there you can see, you know, it's bumping around there. This just kind of came in the middle of the afternoon.
It really caught so many people off guard because, again, as Chief Meteorologist Chris Holman was saying, you can't predict these, you know, like you can a possible tornado with a severe weather event or a hurricane. That 5.9 magnitude quake right outside of Richmond. And what I thought was fascinating about the White House video is you immediately see people climb out onto the roof because, you know, I believe there's the no-fly zone in a certain area right there, right around the White House, and of course they want to know what is going on. Is there an actual threat in the area? And thankfully it was an earthquake and no man-made threat, we should say, but an earthquake felt all the way up and down the East Coast, from as far south that we know from Fayetteville, from our cruise down there, on up to Rhode Island. But everyone has a little story to tell this afternoon, unless they were driving. Our Fred Shropshire and Chris Holman were out on the road, so they missed that excitement, but they're hearing all about it.
You know, and experts are telling us this is very unusual for the East Coast to have an earthquake of this magnitude felt, you know, from as far south as Fayetteville, as far north as Rhode Island. We're receiving some information from the RDU airport about this earthquake, and Mindy Hamlin, who is the spokesperson for RDU, says that there are no ground stops at RDU due to the Virginia earthquake. Flights will only be affected to airports with ground stops. Washington National, Washington Dulles, Newark, Philadelphia, and Richmond. So if you're flying out, you may want to just, you know, check on things to see if there's anything affected in that way. Yeah, we have some new information coming in out of New York. There are some public officials speaking in Manhattan now. We know a lot of buildings were evacuated there, and they were speaking when it happened, and we have some video of that exact moment. Do we? Let's take.
For generations, this standard has protected. Okay. So no, I'm okay. I've been through earthquakes in Seattle all over.
Wow, some pretty incredible images there. And you could see just the look of confusion and concern on the faces there of the speaker, then some people getting up right away and evacuating. You know, anytime you go to the press briefings lately, and I know here in our state, anytime I cover Governor Bev Perdue making a jobs announcement or different announcements like that, there's usually a chief operating officer who will say, you know, in the event of an emergency, here's the best way to evacuate. And that seems to become standard now, announcing the safest evacuation route just in case there's any type of an emergency. And of course, That's what people were seeing and experiencing here today. An earthquake, most of us not knowing exactly what it was as we were feeling that, but a lot of people felt the best thing to do was to evacuate the building they were in, whether that was the RBC Tower here in downtown Raleigh, the Progress Energy building, employees deciding it's the best idea is to walk down the stairwell and evacuate. Come on out here to Fayetteville Street, see what else is going on, just to make sure there's no structural damage that you have to be concerned about.
We've been getting lots of emails, and we got another one from a viewer, Barrett Brewington. He lives in Durham, and he was saying that he's heard that someone in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, actually felt this too. That would be Myrtle Beach all the way up to Rhode Island. And it's something that Chris was explaining a little bit earlier, that earthquakes on the East Coast do have a tendency to be felt by people from a great distance, right, Chris?
Yeah, it's all to do with the soil, and I'm by no means an expert on this. The geologists will be able to tell you more. But from what I've read over the years, it's the soil in the eastern U.S. is sandier, clay soil, and it can carry those shock waves a much greater distance than in California. So in most cases, a 6 earthquake, like close to what was felt or centered near Richmond, it was a half-mile deep, by the way. That wouldn't be felt nearly the distance, up and down the East Coast. Seeing reports now, people in Georgia felt this.
Wow.
Yeah, and all the way up to Maine and to Canada. So, hundreds of miles up and down the East Coast. And we talked earlier about an earthquake in Missouri centered back in the early 1800s. And you can look up Google New Madrid earthquakes if you're interested in earthquakes, and you'll see this was amazing. If this ever happens again in these cities in the Midwest like St. Louis or the Mid-South, Memphis, they would be just devastated, because this was an 8.5, 8.6 earthquake or higher. Back in the early 1800s, there weren't many buildings, but this traveled all the way to Boston. Church bells rang in Boston from an earthquake in Missouri.
Wow.
And again, if that were to happen today, some of these cities like St. Louis, Memphis would just be devastated, and they are actually considered in a high risk for a damaging earthquake in the middle part of the country. Western North Carolina is considered in a moderate risk for earthquakes, and so is coastal South Carolina because of some fault zones. But here in central North Carolina, we typically don't ever experience this, as everybody's talking about. Very, very unusual. I've never, I remember some tiny earthquakes over the 20 years I've been here, centered somewhere in the Carolinas, Virginia, but barely even being felt, 2s and 3s, and that's it. So yeah, it's really one of these days, this will be one of those days, everybody, where were you when the earthquake?
Where were you then? I know, and thankfully there has been no reports of widespread damage, even around the Richmond area. We're just hearing about walls shaking, pictures maybe falling off the walls, but we have not heard of any major structural damage. Now, we do have an email that this is kind of a scary situation. Enrique Alvarado sent this to our breaking news at abc11mail.com, which you can too. His story is: at Pro Tire in Raleigh, one of the mechanics was working under a car that was sitting on an alignment machine about head height, and he saw the car shaking a lot. Then the building started shaking more and more. He panicked and ran away from underneath the car, but he didn't know what was going on. It was scary. So yeah, imagine that.
That's a scary situation.
A heavy car lifted, you're working underneath, and you just don't think about something like that.
You wonder what people in Los Angeles do every day that have jobs like that, because that could happen to them. Anytime. And that's the scary thing about earthquakes. We talked earlier. There is no predicting them. So, scientists are trying. And in Tokyo, in Japan, with those devastating earthquakes earlier in the year, they actually have sensors underground that detect as soon as there's motion. They send alerts out to people. You know how we offer text alerts for severe weather? Well, in Japan, you can actually get these alerts sent to your phone or your home, and as soon as the instant there is any motion detected in the ground, it sends out alerts so that people in Tokyo, which were a good distance away from the epicenter, had some time to react. They actually had a little bit of warning, and scientists are trying to get that implemented more and more in the United States, even in particularly earthquake-prone areas like California. You mentioned tsunami, and we're not completely tsunami worry-free. It's very unlikely. It's one of those things that I wouldn't worry about going to the beach or anything. But it's not impossible that an earthquake centered, say, down in the Dominican Republic, where Haiti, they had that earthquake. There was no tsunami generated then, but earthquakes centered down in some of those areas of the Atlantic, which are prone to earthquakes. It's not impossible that they send a tsunami somewhere up the East Coast in the future. Hopefully, that's not
hopefully that's
nothing
way
really to worry about. But it's not impossible. Yeah.
Exactly.
All right. All eyes have been on Hurricane Irene, so this was the unanticipated event here.
I walked into work and I was in the car and didn't feel it. And I mentioned earlier, my wife texted me and I said, I got this text and you're not supposed to read them. I had got to a light, of course, and looked at it and she goes, we felt her office shaking. She works near the Beltline. And I said, I don't know what she was talking about. I didn't feel it. And I walk into work and all the photographers are like, you don't want to come in. They're going, because it's,
we're crazy breaking news on this earthquake.
Talking about Irene, that it was going to be one of those, with the storm. So Irene's taking a little bit of a backstage. The good news, and we'll talk about that at 4, is the track for Irene continues to shift eastward. Still, our coast, the Outer Banks are somewhat, are still in the path. But for central parts of the state, if this track verifies, are going to be less severe. So we'll talk about that once we get through the earthquake coverage first.
Yeah. Well, that's good news as Irene kind of pushes a little bit east. I know there is obviously still the threat to North Carolina for now, but so yeah, you'll have to continue to tune in to Eyewitness News for the latest on Irene.
It'd be nice if, on Thursday or Saturday it was centered to go near, or forecast to go near Miami. Now it's almost the Outer Banks. It would be great if this continues east and it's out in the middle of the Atlantic. But we'll keep an eye on that. I have much more coming up at 4.
Yeah, that's what we'll hope. We'll take our 30-second, 1-minute shake here in downtown Raleigh over a major hurricane any day. All right, Chris, thank you. We do have some video from the White House, a White House cam, our ABC White House cam, that was rolling at the time that the earthquake was felt there, and we've seen video of, there's the White House video.
You can
right
see that
there.
camera shaking.
Yeah, it almost seems like strong wind, the way that we've seen that with our tower cams. But then look at the number of people out there on the roof just wondering, what was that? And now we know that it is the earthquake. There's also video of the U.S. Capitol, the Capitol cam that you see for some of our live shots out of Washington, D.C., where you can see the building shaking there as well. Just take a moment looking at your screen there and you'll see this.
And it was it's been such a nice day today. You just really didn't expect anything to happen. There was not even rain in the forecast for a lot of people.
I know, I think most of us are enjoying this nice weather, no humidity, before, Hurricane Irene possibly hits North Carolina this weekend. So we've been trying to enjoy the nice weather, and then all of us got a little shake here this afternoon.
It'll be interesting to find out a little bit more about this as we go along, because as we've listened to people's stories, they've all had different reports about, I felt it for 2 minutes, I felt it for 30 seconds, I felt a little tremor, and then I felt nothing, and then I felt more. So I'm sure as time goes on, we will be able to get a clearer picture of exactly who felt what and the strengths of things here and there. We know 5.9 magnitude outside of Richmond that was pretty much felt up and down the East Coast, as Chris was saying, because of the conditions here, because of the soil that we have here, that so many people were able to experience this afternoon. So I have my colleague Fred Shropshire joining me now, and you got a chance to talk to a lot of people who were in these tall buildings here in downtown Raleigh when all of this happened. And I guess the main thing that everyone felt at that time was fear, because they didn't know what was happening.
And people are still feeling fear, because we're not used to feeling an earthquake here, and a lot of people who were from out of town didn't know any better, so they thought maybe there was construction going on, maybe there was a subway system here in Raleigh. We don't have a subway system here in Raleigh, so they felt that trembling and that rocking going on. And what I thought was interesting is that there weren't any evacuations. I kept asking that question when I was outside the Raleigh Eyewitness News Center. Did you hear any announcements? Did you hear any evacuations? There weren't any evacuations. People kind of just stayed where they were. One woman I talked to was eating lunch outside in the restaurant Normally she would have been inside the Wake County Courthouse, but she said that she wanted to eat outside this particular day. She felt the table shaking. It was against the wall. It was a concrete bench there. She couldn't move it, but that unnerved her as well. So there were, you know, people trying to figure out what this was. A lot of people, too, still trying to contact their family members. As you were mentioning, the phone lines jammed up. A lot of people are just now getting in touch with family members. One woman I talked to is still trying to get in touch with relatives in Brooklyn, New York. Oh, wow. Yeah, still trying to get in touch with people there. She said that she moved here after September 11th. She was there for a situation that happened in the 90s. She was there for September 11th, said she didn't want to stick around after that situation happened, and now this. So she was very unnerved about what was going on. And then we spoke to another woman who had a daughter who works at the United Nations Foundation, and she got in touch with her. Actually, she kept trying to call her daughter. The daughter called her and told her that everything was fine. They evacuated the building, everybody was fine, and what I found interesting is that they went back inside the building and continued their work. So, you know, a lot of people just trying to figure out still what this is, worried about what the risk is now that this has happened. It'll be interesting to see exactly where this was felt as soon as they release official information on this. One woman we talked to said that she was working faster than CNN. She said that she felt this tremor, got on her email account, emailed people all the way, you know, across the country, and she said she got a response back from a friend who was in Ohio and said that they felt this. So it'll be interesting to see how widespread this tremor was when they released the official information from this.
We have some folks down in Fayetteville that were telling us their stories a little bit earlier, how they felt it there. Greg Barnes is standing by live, and he has some reports from the Sandhills. Greg?
Hi guys, it's a little unsettling down here for the residents in the Fayetteville area. Everybody down here said that said they felt the tremor this afternoon. Some said it felt like it may have lasted 15 seconds. Others say it felt like it lasted almost a lifetime. We know of at least one building here in downtown Fayetteville. That's the Medical Arts Building that's here on Hay Street and Robinson Street. Was temporarily evacuated mainly as a safety precaution. Residents inside that we talked with said that at first they thought like a storm had come by and the wind was getting buffeted, or the building was getting buffeted by high winds. Here's what they had to say.
And I kind of looked out the window and no storm, so I was a little puzzled.
What happened? They evacuated the building? And
Yes, they called us, and I went back into my office, and then I came back out, and they were calling to evacuate the building, and we all evacuated immediately, grabbed our things, locked the doors, and out we went.
Kind of scary, wasn't it?
It was a little spooky, yes, not knowing what it was.
I was on the top floor meeting with our building manager. Just a little rumble. He felt it more than I did and pointed it out. But it was just a minor shake of the building.
Yeah, that gentleman right there, Keith Allison, he owns the Sistell building in downtown Fayetteville. That's the building where our news bureau is located. It's an 11-story building, and up at the top, it more swayed, the residents say, rather than rumbled. Down here on the ground, a lot of residents said they sort of felt like they had just hit a sort of a bump in the road. It's had a few seconds of just unsteadiness, they said, but the higher up in the building that you went, the more of a sway that you say that they got as well, too. I talked to the Sheriff's Department. No serious reports of damage anywhere in the area. Folks over at Cape Fear Valley Medical Center say there was no evidence of any damage over there. They are checking, though, all of their sophisticated and very sensitive medical equipment just to make sure nothing was thrown out of kilter. Again, no reports of any injuries. Just an unsettling afternoon, guys. Back to you.
Just a scary situation. Greg Barnes live from Fayetteville for us. Thank you for that, Greg. Hey, on the phone now, we're joined by Dr. Del Bonesteel. He is a seismologist with NC State. Dr. Bonesteel, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, thanks for joining us. The first question is we've been talking about how, I guess, uncommon this is for North Carolina. Do we have any fault lines in our state?
Well, we do have fault lines. The faults in Virginia and the faults down here were actually formed hundreds of millions of years ago. And what happens these days, you can imagine the crust everywhere just started getting squeezed a little bit, and there seem to be places where occasionally we get earthquakes that pop off. So here in North Carolina, we'll get magnitude 2 earthquakes all the time, probably the kind of thing you wouldn't feel very much unless you're right on top of it. And occasionally we'll get something magnitude 4, even very rarely a magnitude 5 or so. And the same is true up in Virginia. They're a little more active up there, but occasionally they get one of these earthquakes every few decades or so.
So this is something that happens very rarely. Should we have any concerns right now, maybe aftershocks? What should people's main concerns be?
Well, typically with an earthquake, what we see is that within the next day or so, we'd expect an earthquake that's about a magnitude unit lower than this one. So this one's a 5.9. We might expect another magnitude 5 or so earthquake to hit as an aftershock. That's very likely. And if that happens, it'll probably happen sooner than later. So within the next 24 hours or so is really the time to keep an eye on that. So if buildings are damaged or things like that close to the earthquake, it's these next few days where we want to be on the lookout.
Mm-hmm. I know you're not an architect, but you do deal with seismology, and we're looking a live look now, Chopper 11 HD, showing us a skyline shot of Raleigh here. And so one of the thoughts that pops up in your mind is damage to buildings, even damages that we may not be able to see because of the impact that we felt today. How much of a risk is that?
I would say at this distance, damage to buildings isn't a great threat. We probably don't need to be too concerned. Most of the infrastructure, I wouldn't expect anything to be damaged. Closer up in Virginia, though, there may be some problems. One of the things on the East Coast is we don't, as you say, think about these things very often. And so we have a lot of these masonry buildings which really aren't designed. Some of the oldest structures aren't designed for these moderate-sized quakes even. But at this distance, we should be fine. I wouldn't expect any damage down here in Raleigh.
So if people do have, maybe live in an older home, it probably wouldn't hurt to inspect things a little bit.
You could poke around, but at the distance we are away here in Raleigh, I'd be surprised if we heard any reports or any significant damage anywhere.
All righty, Dr. Del Bonastile, NC State seismologist, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon.
You're welcome.
And you were mentioning how some of those monuments were evacuated and whatnot. The U.S. Park Service is evacuating and closing all of the National Mall monuments and memorials. This weekend they're preparing to officially dedicate the Martin Luther King Jr. Memorial in Washington, D.C. as well. So it'll be interesting to see how long or what the interference will be with activities as we look toward the end of the week.
What we're looking at now on your screen is an aftershock near the Richmond area at 2.8. I haven't felt anything here. We haven't gotten any responses locally as far as anyone feeling any more tremors. Of course, this is significantly weaker than what we felt earlier today at 5.9, but we are now hearing reports of a 2.8 aftershock.
It's interesting too, because one of the people I talked to downtown here not too long ago said that she'd gotten a call from someone that they felt the tremor, and she said she felt it about 10 minutes later. Okay. And this was from Virginia. I don't know what the math would be or what the impact would be or the difference would be, because that's a 2.8. But to give you some idea, she said it took about 10 minutes for us to feel the impact after she got that phone call from a friend who had experienced the first tremor up there in Virginia.
One thing that an expert that called in a little bit earlier said that when you're dealing with aftershocks, they are, of course, a lot weaker. Considering what we felt here, some of the seismologists that we talked to throughout the course of the day said that we shouldn't have any more problems here, that what you felt earlier today was probably as significant as it was going to get. But we are hearing that the original quake has been downgraded back to a 5.8 magnitude that struck just outside of Richmond, Virginia. Yeah,
but a lot of people still talking about what they experienced as this was happening. You heard Greg Barnes talking about 10 or 15 minutes ago, talking about people in Fayetteville and what they felt. They're used to feeling training exercises down there, I grew up in Jacksonville, North Carolina, and you would hear the helicopters and the planes go by. You would hear sometimes the training and the bombs go off, and you would feel a shaking in your house, and you would hear things rattle, and you thought that was normal. Well, today, we now know that that was a tremor, indeed, that we're feeling, and now that has been downgraded to a 5.8, originating outside of Richmond, Virginia. You were talking about some of the situations that were going on with the Sharon Harris nuclear plant, and we know that the impact felt in Virginia was great. 2 nuclear reactors at the North Anna Power Station in the same county as the epicenter were automatically taken offline by safety systems, and this was around the same time that the earthquake happened. All right, well, Steve Daniels is in the Breaking News Center with some new video in and also some new information for us. Steve?
Fred and Tisha here in the Breaking News Center. Since this earthquake hit, we have been getting phone calls and emails and concern, obviously, from a lot of people throughout the viewing area. We've also been getting video, and if you know of surveillance video or video that you have and you'd like to share it with us, you can certainly upload it directly to our website. Go to the U Report link on our website at abc11.com. But let's take a look at this video right now, and I can play it for you, and I can set it up for you. This is from a business in Raleigh near the farmers market called Supersod, and just take a look at this. This is fed into us via U Report, powered by YouTube, and you can see there, this is what they describe as the moment the earthquake hit. Normally, this sod business near the farmers market, this camera is just still. But here, let's replay it. We can take another look at it here. They say that does show the earthquake as it was happening, the jiggling of the camera. And that's what we're hearing from a lot of people, this jolt, something unusual certainly for us here in this part of North Carolina. I was in the car. I didn't happen to feel it at the time, but my kids say they felt it at home in Wake County and felt this jolt. I grew up in Southern California and lived through many earthquakes in my younger years as a small child, and they're really terrifying. And you know, having not felt this one today, I can't tell you what this felt like relative to some of the earthquakes I've been through in Southern California, but I went through some significant ones, earthquakes that actually brought down overpasses, freeway overpasses, where there was absolute destruction in Southern California, and they're terrifying because you don't know how significant it's going to be, how long it's going to last, what kind of earthquake it's going to be, if it's going to be the rolling kind of earthquake or a jolting kind of earthquake. And as we've been learning this afternoon, we've gotten a very quick education here in North Carolina about earthquakes this afternoon, and the depth plays a role. Obviously, the magnitude on the Richter scale plays a significant role as well. But I grew up as a kid where we would have drop drills in our schools, earthquake drills in the school, and this is something that people in the West certainly learn, that you go to a door jamb, you get under a desk, you get under a very sturdy table, you go anywhere you possibly can to try to get out of debris, get away from windows, and get away from anything that could be collapsing, and try to get into the interior of the building as well, the most fortified part of that. But again, this is what's coming in right now, this information into the Breaking News Center, more eyewitness accounts of people feeling this. For many people in this part of the country, of course, this is a first feeling this kind of earthquake, and it is unsettling. We've been hearing, of course, from people from Washington, closer to the epicenter of this earthquake in Virginia, who have been saying they thought it was some kind of attack or an explosion in the Washington, D.C. area. We heard that the Capitol building was immediately evacuated. They went to work quickly there. Of course, since 9/11, they have plans to evacuate the Capitol building very quickly. And as we take a look here at our live feeds coming in from Washington this afternoon, we're looking at the Washington Monument. We know there is some structural concern there right now. They've been sending engineers into the Washington Monument, checking it out for any structural damage. And that is the story throughout Washington and New York this afternoon. This is a live feed we're getting in. The D.C. area, perhaps Baltimore, in fact, we're trying to get a closer location, but you can see unreinforced masonry buildings like this, brick buildings. That's where you find the damage in an earthquake. If they don't have steel rebar or aren't reinforced to much of a degree, then you're going to find this, bricks that have fallen apart. The water tower on top of that building you see. This is an affiliate feed from one of our affiliates in the Washington, D.C. area. You can see lots of people up there on the building as well. I've heard that in other parts of Washington, D.C., even in new buildings this afternoon, those buildings are being evacuated, and people are being told to stay outside. Some buildings, people are being allowed to go back inside to get their belongings and then leave, but structural engineers are going through a lot of buildings, even up into New York, but especially in the Washington, D.C. area this afternoon, as they try to determine the structural integrity of these buildings. Of course, they don't want people going back inside when there could be the risk of aftershocks, and that is something, of course, we're learning all about this afternoon, but aftershocks will continue. There have been aftershocks this afternoon. And there certainly is going to be concern about these buildings and the aftershocks, and they just don't want people going back inside these buildings. Most modern buildings, of course, throughout the country are built to withstand all kinds of things that Mother Nature can bring, whether it's an earthquake or a tornado or a hurricane. But some older buildings, like that one we were just watching in the Washington, D.C. area from that live feed, that looks like an older building, a brick building. It may be unreinforced masonry, and that's why there is concern there, and especially when you see that water tower that has in some part fallen apart, and there's a chimney there that's fallen apart. There is concern there as well. We continue monitoring developments all across the East Coast. You may have heard too that some of the New York area airports were shut down this afternoon. The JFK airport was shut down for a time because the control tower, there were questions about the control tower, and they wanted to evacuate the air traffic controllers from there and then do an inspection, a full inspection of the JFK airport. So there are flight delays from the RDU airport this afternoon going to the New York area airports, and they are trying to get that air traffic moving again, but there are certainly concerns in the New York area about that right now. And here in the capital city, as we take a live look at the downtown Raleigh skyline, certainly the story here is the talk. Everybody talking about this earthquake, what they felt. The feeling you were going to have is going to be different based on the kind of building you were in. Here at Eyewitness News, there were a lot of people who were in the newsroom who felt it. If you're in a taller building, of course, depending on the engineering of that building, you're going to have a different sensation than you are in your house. If you're walking on the street, you may or may not feel that. So it really depends on where you are, what you felt, and the kind of story you're going to be able to tell about this as you talk to your friends through the afternoon. But the social media in the Triangle this afternoon was really exploding. People were posting on Twitter and Facebook. Did you feel that? It felt like an earthquake. People were wondering what in the world this was. Could it have possibly have been an earthquake here in this area? And now we know it was north of Richmond. That's where the earthquake was, the epicenter of the earthquake. And it's you know, something that radiated out there. You can see here, based on this graphic that Chris Homan put together, it was felt down here to the south into North Carolina. They're saying it was felt even up into Canada today, and certainly there through the Washington, D.C. area, up into Philadelphia and New York, and west into West Virginia as well. So people all across our region of the country talking about this earthquake tonight. But the incredible part is, amazingly, we're not seeing or hearing reports of significant damage. And that is really pretty amazing when you consider the magnitude of this earthquake. When you see these kinds of earthquakes in different parts of the world, a 5.9 magnitude earthquake, you know, it can cause substantial damage. It can cause substantial damage and substantial injury, depending on where this kind of thing happens, and depending, as we've been hearing from seismologists this afternoon, there's so many different variables here. It can depend on the depth, the magnitude. There's so many different things that factor into this, and of course the kind of soil you have where you live, and what kind of construction you have with the various the buildings where you happen to be. So there's so many different variables. Thankfully, though, we're not getting reports of significant damage anywhere. But again, if you're just joining us, just tuning in, as we take a live look at the RDU airport, where there are flight delays this afternoon to the New York area airports. A lot of planes have not been able to get out of New York. They've been grounded. And they can't, of course, get here to get passengers, and flights bound from RDU to the New York area airports. They are backed up this afternoon as well because of those concerns in the control towers in the New York area. But what we can tell you, it was a 5.9 magnitude earthquake. That's the latest indication we have. The epicenter was in Mineral, Virginia, and it was felt primarily by people, of course, in that part of Virginia, but also into Washington. And of course, there has been a lot of concern coming up on the 10th anniversary of the 9/11 attacks that there could be some kind of attack planned by Al-Qaeda. Al-Qaeda has certainly threatened that. The Department of Homeland Security is on alert. So you can imagine, for people in Washington, D.C. this afternoon, when they felt that shaking, they did not know what to expect. A lot of people in their office buildings went running to the windows, looking outside, trying to make sense of exactly what was happening. And fortunately, it was not an attack, but it was obviously, now we know, an earthquake. And they have been been adjusting the magnitude from 5.9 to 5.8. They continue taking a look at this and taking a look at the seismology information and trying to get a better sense of this earthquake and exactly what was made of this earthquake. And they often go back and they will take a look at this and take a look at the dynamics associated with an earthquake, and they will take another look at the magnitude, and they sometimes adjust it down, sometimes up, and they then study this and find out much more what this particular earthquake was made of and the components of it. This is a very rare event, obviously, not unheard of in this part of the country, but it is a rare event nonetheless, and it's certainly something we'll be talking about for a very long time. But again, the most critical thing and the most important thing is the fact that there has not been any significant damage anywhere that we've seen. We did see that live feed coming in from somewhere in the Washington, D.C. area, where a chimney partially collapsed on top of an apartment building, also connected to a water tower as well.